233. We're in the middle of talking about Ashrei. Let me just briefly summarize what we did yesterday. Yeah. Of Hirsch, this being the 145th Psalm, what we call Ashrei has an extra verse at the beginning and an extra verse at the end, which aren't part of the 145th Psalm. We're only doing the 145th Psalm, not doing the beginning and end. Those are an introduction and post. So he says that the verses, the first 9 verses, even 12, describe a dialogue, an interaction between the speaker, the I in the text, whom I'm identifying with King David, and the general population, which is sometimes generation to generation, and sometimes it's the population in his time. It's the single speaker interacting with the many. And in the third verse, the single speaker announces himself as focusing on loving kindness in God. And then in the fourth verse, the many praise God's acts and the power in the acts. In the fifth verse, the speaker takes the idea of power and talks about splendorous glory and wonder, which is a much more sophisticated and much more noble picture of actions and power. And in the beginning of the 6th verse, the many get it because they then talk about awesome power, which is on a level of glory and splendor. And then the individual, who's in the second half of 6, goes to greatness, which I told you is loving kindness. And then in the 7th, they actually get to the point of goodness and righteousness. And goodness is almost a synonym for loving kindness. So you have here a stage-by-stage interaction where the speaker raises the many in level of understanding and depth for the entirety of how you look at the creation. That's what we did last time. And now, the next 3 verses, the many are expressing themselves, and it's gracious and merciful and slow to anger, great in kindness and good and mercies. That's all appreciation of loving kindness, various aspects of loving kindness. So up to there, you have this progression, and you have a beautiful expression of the many grasping, at least in the general category, of the same point of view as the individual speaker. Now, the 10th verse, it goes back to talking about talking. All of your works shall thank you. Your devout ones shall bless you. Of the glory of your kingdom they will speak. Your power they will tell. To inform human beings with mighty deeds. To inform glorious splendor of his kingdom. Those 3 verses are all again about talking. Now comes a whole string of verses which describe the way in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world. And we'll go through them now in detail and then see what their subject is and how they interact with one another. Your kingdom is a kingdom spanning all eternities. Your dominion is over every generation. So that's HaKadosh Baruch Hu's running the world. Hashem supports all the fallen ones and straightens all the bent. That's loving kindness, isn't it? The eyes of all look to you with hope, and you give them their food in its proper time. That's loving kindness, isn't it? You open your hand and satisfy the desire of every living thing. That's loving kindness. That's 3. Righteous is Hashem in all his ways, and magnanimous in all his deeds. Righteous means at least that he's fair. Magnanimous means that he's generous. That's loving kindness. Hashem is close to all who call upon him. That's also loving kindness. Now there's a little qualification. To all who call upon him sincerely. Yes. Remember that everyone who calls, but you wouldn't expect someone who's calling insincerely to be answered necessarily, would you? So it's not much of a qualification. He will do the will of those that fear him. He will hear their cry and save them. That's more loving kindness. Hashem protects all those who love him. That's more loving kindness. This is 6.5 verses of loving kindness. Now comes one little remark. All the wicked he will destroy. That's not loving kindness. Not straightforwardly anyway. That's justice. So you have 6.5 verses that describe loving kindness and half a verse that describes justice. I think that shows you that the overwhelming subject that's being discussed here is loving kindness. Which is what the individual speaker started with, and where he raised many up level by level to get to loving kindness, and then the verses that express loving kindness. All of this is various aspects, various dimensions of loving kindness, except for the last piece, which we call like a reality fact. Okay, so that's definitely the sum total of the focus. And then we spoke last time about my mouth shall declare, and all flesh shall bless, which means that the stimulus of the exalted individual is necessary for the many to maintain their focus on that subject. Now, for a couple of sort of deeper and hints. This is an alphabetical psalm, a number of alphabetical psalms, but it's missing one letter. Which letter is it missing? It's missing the nun. Why is that? So the Gemara asks that question. Why is that? So I'll tell you why. Because the letter nun is the beginning of the word nofel, which means to fall. Sorry, can't have that. That's why the letter nun isn't there. To which you want to ask.
Like other words that start with nun.
There are lots of other words that begin with nun, like notain. Like gives. What's wrong with that? Is that a reason not to have the and this question is discussed. I saw, and I would regard as an unbelievably brilliant explanation. I was in shul for mincha in the Boston shul in Har Nov, and I was there a few minutes early. So I pick up a sefer to look at something. Sefer was totally unknown to me, and he gives an explanation. It turns out to have been written by the mashgiach in the Chubin Yeshiva. If I'm not mistaken, the name of the sefer is Keren B'Yavna, as a commentary on the Book of Psalms. I said, wow, a commentary in the Book of Psalms. I've got to look this up and see what he says. Let me tell you what he says. Let me show you what he says. Take a look at the verse that's together with the letter Chaf. It's right in the middle of the page. Of the glory of your kingdom they will speak, and of your power they will tell. Okay, that's kingdom, power. To inform human beings of his mighty deeds, that's power, and the glorious splendor of his kingdom. So it's A, B, B, A, right? It's kingdom, power, power, kingdom. Right? Okay. Your kingdom is a kingdom spanning all eternities. Your dominion, which is another word for kingdom, is over every generation. So this verse is kingdom, kingdom. Okay. Now finish it out. Kingdom, power, power, kingdom. Kingdom, kingdom, power, power. Right? That's how you finish the pattern. What is power? Power here is gvura. Gvura is a synonym for strict justice. Strict justice. That's why the nun would go for no fail. because somebody would be being judged strictly, and he would have to take a fall. That's why the nun is davka for nofel, because the pattern is setting up power, which is justice. It's setting it up. And what's the message from King David? Watch, he says. Kingdom, power, kingdom. Power, kingdom. Next comes power. No, don't put it in. Skip it. Leave it out. He's saying it's not about justice. This psalm is about loving kindness. That's not the subject. He's enforcing the idea of the subject by setting up the insertion of the opposite and skipping it and telling you that's not what this is about. Once you see it, the pattern is absolutely obvious. It's right on the surface. You just have to have a certain kind of mind to see a pattern like that. So that's, sorry?
Write it out, like I don't know if that's like a thing we can just go through the letter, go through the alphabet, because we had like talking, deeds, and then there's deeds, the power,
So you want me to tell you with the letters?
Yeah.
Okay. So Aleph and Beis are talking about talking. Gimel is talking. Dalet, Hey, Vav, and Zayin, 4 of them, are talking about talking. Ches and Tes are doing talking. Yud, Chaf, and Lamed are talking about talking. That's 3 now. So first it was 2, then it was 4, then now it's 3. Then Mem all the way to Shin are talking, describing things. And then Taf at the end is talking about talking.
And then the kingdom power were those.
Okay, so that's Chaf is kingdom power. Lamed is power kingdom. Mem is kingdom. And Nun is left out. Nun is left out because it should have been power. Okay. Then I want to talk about the verse, which is the most central verse. In fact, this art school says next to the pay, concentrate intently while reciting this verse. So Chazal say that this verse is somehow the core of the whole Tehillah. And it's translated in the art school translation, you open your hand and satisfy the desire of every living thing. That's not a wrong translation. Some of the commentators in the book of Psalms do use that translation for the words, or the understanding of the words in the Hebrew.
Is there another way to translate it?
There is, and the other way to translate it is prompted by the fact that these words in English, if you would write them in Hebrew, you wouldn't get exactly what's written on the Hebrew side. These words, you open your hand and satisfy the desire of every living thing, in plain Hebrew would be Poseach es yedecha umasbia rotzon kol chai. Not masbia le kol chai rotzon. Now that could be poetry. I think that's what moves the other commentators to say that's what it really means. And it's just a poetical way of meaning it, and I think that's perfectly all right. But there's another pshat, which I heard from my Rabbi Zatzal. It's Tzlach and Brochos. Let's suppose the verse had been written, Masbia l'chol chai lechem. Satisfies to all living things bread or food. Then you would know what to say. He satisfies all living things by giving them food. That's how he does it. The lamed would be who's getting the food. Okay, so if that's true, then when you put back the rotzon for lechem, it would have to mean He satisfies all living things by giving them rotzon. What would that mean? Rotzon means will. So the pshat here is that he satisfies all living things by putting his will in them. And when they act on his will, then they will have satisfaction. Now, let's not worry about animals and other things for the moment. Let's talk about human beings. Every place where we ask God for material benefits, physical benefits, the verb is always sab'enu, satisfy us. The real blessing in the physical world is to be satisfied with what you have. There's a chazal that says, a person who has 100 wants 200. A person who has 200 wants 400. My Rabbi said that means the more you have, the more you lack. Is that good? Does that mean you're happy? The more you have, the bigger your desires grow so that you're always lacking, always. And the more you have, the more you lack. That's a recipe for unhappiness, bitterness, disappointment, frustration. The great blessing in the physical world is sab'enu, satisfy us. There is a verse in Proverbs, Ohev kesef lo yizba kesef. A person who loves kesef will not be satisfied with kesef. There are two explanations of the word kesef. One is money, which is it literally means silver, but it is used for money. And then the verse would be saying, if you love money, you'll never be satisfied with money, with the money that you have. Now you tell me, is that a blessing or a curse? Curse. Never be satisfied? Imagine living a life without ever being satisfied? That's not a blessing. You love money, you'll never be satisfied with the money that you have, and that's a curse. Rashi's pshat in kesef is mitzvos. Someone who loves mitzvos will never be satisfied with the mitzvos that he has. Is that a blessing or a curse? That's a blessing. You're not satisfied with your spiritual level. You're always striving for greater light, greater heights of spirituality, greater breadth and depth of spirituality. That's a blessing. Indeed, a person who isn't looking forward to some kind of spiritual growth, that's what it says, isn't really alive. Right? Life is change and development and growth. Okay, now you understand why when we ask for material support, we say sab'enu, because satisfaction in the material world is a great blessing, whereas satisfaction in the spiritual world is not a blessing. Okay, now having gone through all of that, let's go back to the verse. You open your hand and satisfy living things. Is it talking about physical or spiritual? It's got to be physical. And for some people, it's a jolt. Wait a minute, this is this is Ashrei. And talking about the most wonderful things in the world. Why would we be talking about the physical? But it's got to be physical because it's telling us that he makes us satisfied. He makes us satisfied. Satisfaction is only a blessing in the physical. Okay, now how does it work? Well, it works like this. Whether or not you get satisfaction from the physical world depends upon your attitude towards the physical world. In particular, there's one of God's names, which is spelled Shin, then a Dalet, and a Yud. And the Gemara says it's short for She'omar la'olam odai, the one who said to his world, enough. And the picture the Talmud describes is the world is expanding. No, it's not the Big Bang. Period. The world is expanding, adding new mass and energy, not just this expansion of space. And then God said to it, enough, and it stopped expanding. So it's not the Big Bang, because the Big Bang is still going on now. Some people like to connect these things, but it's usually very sloppy. Now, picture this. The world is expanding, growing, increasing, and then Kodesh Baruch Hu says, enough. Where is the Kodesh Baruch Hu standing? What's his position what's his point of view where he watches it, so to speak, expanding, and then says enough. He's watching something which is a means to an end. He's measuring how much he has against how much he needs for that purpose. And when he has enough of this to serve that purpose, then he says enough. Enough means this isn't an end unto itself. It's not intrinsically valuable. Because if it were, the more you have, the better off you are. Why would you ever say enough? Why wouldn't you want more? So he's standing, and this is the expansion of the physical world. So now, if we adopt that point of view, if we have God's will in us, if we act on that will, if we identify with that will, and that will is you stand back from the physical and you measure the physical against your projects, and your projects aren't physical projects, they're spiritual projects, then you measure how much of the physical world you have access to by the projects that you have, and if you have enough of the physical world to accomplish your projects, then you have enough and you're satisfied. That's how you become satisfied, by having that will which orients you to the physical as only a means for my spiritual projects. That's the inner meaning of this verse. So, is this verse about the physical? Well, the clear Jewish answer is yes and no. It's speaking about the physical, but what it says about the physical presupposes a certain spiritual reality, a certain spiritual attitude. It's talking about satisfaction in your physical possessions, but that's only available to someone who has a certain intellectual and emotional attitude, which is part of his spirituality. It used to be common, I don't know if people talk this way anymore, but it used to be common to say a person who's unsatisfied, who's frustrated, is often because of a gap between his desires and his possessions. There are two ways to close the gap. One is to get more possessions, and the other is to reduce your desires. They both close the gap, and they both will take away your dissatisfaction. So, in our case, it's adopting this particular will that enables us to have this great blessing of being satisfied in the physical. Yeah.
But then, are we asking for this Moshe to give this to us, or are we saying he gives it to us?
We're saying he gives it to us. We're talking about the great things that he does for us, great loving kindnesses that he does for us. And one of the things he does is he puts this in us. Now, I hinted at this before, but let me just spell it out. That's not the only will we have. There are other things as well, like the evil inclination and other things. So the fact that it's there doesn't guarantee that we'll focus on it, that we'll prioritize it, that we'll live in terms of it. But without that ingredient in us, we wouldn't have a chance.
Do the rabbis say that we are focused on this for that, so that we can try and have this more than...
Oh, you mean focus on this verse?
Yeah, focus on this.
Well, I would say that this is one of the meanings of the verse. I would not say, as I say over and over again, it's not the only meaning. There are other meanings as well, lots of them which I don't know. And it's a very central verse with a lot of messages, and you should at least know that it's a central verse that has something in mind when you say it, and this is one thing that you could possibly have in mind.
No, also, for the name that you mentioned, Dovid, what was the meaning of what you spelled it out for?
She'amar, who said, La'olamo, to his world, die. Enough. Okay, there's one other hint in, here that I know of. Now, for this, let's see, I wonder if they carry this out in the English consistently. Yeah. You notice that each verse has two pieces. Right? In particular, in the middle of the verse, there's an and. But not always. Not always. There are two verses that are missing the and. You find them? Yeah, you found them? Which one are they?
He will do the will of those who fear him. He will hear their cry. Oh, let's see. Shin.
What letters are they?
Shin.
I don't know. Excuse me, Shin.
All who love him.
Oh, because did you do it in English?
Huh?
Did you do it in English?
Oh, yeah.
I don't mind. I don't mind.
The Vav is
But the English has the word but, and but is
in-
and.
Vav is in,
Kaf, I think is missing one.
Kaf? No.
but
Oh, no, there it is.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
Well, it's an u, if in the Hebrew, if that's you're looking in the Hebrew. U is a vav, which means and.
Let me put it.
Kuf, he said.
Kuf. Oh.
Oh, kuf. Kuf, yes. That's
I
right.
meant- Yeah.
That's one of them.
Is Bob in it? No.
Find the other one? No?
Lamed?
Let's see. Lamed.
Oh, no.
No, it has a vav. Which one? Sorry?
Yeah.
No, the vs shavasam shav yishmav. It has a vav. Oh, ches. Ches.
Oh, yeah.
Ches is missing the vav, and kuf is missing the vav. Okay, now here's the remez. Here's the hint. The two letters, ches and kuf, spell the word chok, which means law. Now look where the vavs ought to be, and see what's the first letter in each verse where the vav is missing. Yes, an aleph in the ches verse, and a lamed in the kuf verse. That's the spelling of God's name. So, chok kel, the law of God. And that's one way in which the verse is your provision of physical sustenance is provided. It's called the chok kel. So a little remiss in the fact that two out of the ones don't have the vav. So this shows you that order is very important, and you can communicate something by breaking the order just a little bit. And that's a structure that repeats over and over again. When you see things that are related and have similar structure, the next thing you do is, well, where might there be an exception? Where might it be just a little off? And then you learn. You get a lot from that. Now, I promised you I was going to tell you about Gadol. Gadol means, I don't think I told you this lesson. We didn't talk about it, huh? With infinity? Oh, no. Okay. So Gadol means big. We use big in English for aspects of greatness that aren't physically big. He's a big scholar, he's a big chemist, he's a big football player. He's a big success. So the idea of bigness connoting greatness is something which, now it could be that English took it from biblical sources. There are places where the English was affected by biblical meanings. But is there any way vis-a-vis God? We're talking now about God. In particular, I told you that Gadol here connotes loving kindness. I have a way of putting it together. Now, it's based on my background, because I taught philosophy and mathematics, so I'm using something from my background. As I always say, it's not the only meaning. Could I really? Well, here's the way it can work. Big is a doubly relative term. If you have 16 objects, all of exactly the same size, you don't call one of them big and one of them small. They're all the same size. So big is always relative to other things which are smaller than it. And that's one relativity. And the second relativity is a big ant is minuscule compared to a small elephant. So big is related to a certain group big among ants is one size, and big among elephants is a different size. So bigness is doubly relative. Now you're going to use the word gadol in Hebrew for the Creator who is beyond all comparisons. The qualities that he has aren't qualities that he has because of comparing him to something else. They're absolute qualities. Is there any way that you could use the word big or stretch the word big into something which isn't comparative at all? Well, let's think about the whole numbers. One of the tricks that's nice to play with a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old is to say, what's the biggest number? She says, 1,000. And you say to him, well, what about 1,001? Oh, 1,001. 10,000! So what about 10,001? Now after a few steps, he begins to get it. Oh, I see now. He's always going to add one. So whatever I say, he's always going to add one, and then it dawns on him, wow, then there isn't the biggest number. And that's like a new insight, right? And it is an insight. There isn't the biggest number, because you can always add one. Okay. When you take all the whole numbers together, let's see, all the positive whole numbers, or you want to add 0 with the natural numbers, that whole group has a size. It's called infinity, although the word infinity has many infinities of meaning. So it's very, there are lots and lots of different infinities of different sizes. Maybe someday, if you like, I'll teach you about that. But it's a certain type of infinity. Now, let's take 16. Well, 16 is bigger than 15 other numbers. That's not trivial. But what is it against infinity? It's nothing. If you take 15 away from infinity, you're left with the same infinity. You could start counting at 16 and you'd still go on forever. So, infinity is something which outclasses every finite size. It outclasses it absolutely. You know, a googolplex, which is, 100 to 100 or something, is very, very big, but a googolplex plus 1 is bigger than that. There's no way of going beyond this infinity, at least not by adding more numbers. It won't be any bigger. So now, is there anything about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what he is and what he does, that satisfies this picture of bigness, like the whole numbers which go on forever? There is, and that is his loving kindness. Because he created the world to bestow loving kindness on his creatures, in particular upon people who serve him. And that's going to be carried out in the world to come. And the world to come has no ending. It goes on forever. So the time in the world to come is infinite in that sense. Its size is this infinity. The greatness in the absoluteness in the size is that it outgrows every finite size. Take any finite size you like, after a while it will outgrow that size. That's its absoluteness. It's beyond any finite size you like, because as it continues, it will outgrow each of those sizes. So that may be the connection, one way to connect bigness with loving kindness. In his practice of loving kindness, HaKadosh Baruch Hu lives out this infinite bigness. And that could be like a reason for big to be associated particularly with loving kindness. Question?
Is that how you would make the name that the Balatanya uses, basically infinite, no end, right? Is that how you would translate that name to mean?
Very interesting what you're asking. Some people have, I was told I should repeat the questions. Asking about the Balatanya, the idea of Ein Sof meaning endless. I forget who said this, But notice what it says. There's no end. It doesn't say there's no beginning. It just says there's no end. So that sounds like maybe there is a beginning point, and it goes on from there without end. That's very good. That's just like our world. Our world does have a beginning. There's a first moment in the history of the world. It's just that the moments will go on without end. But there are at least two different ways that people use the word infinite. One is the specific, strict, well-defined mathematical use that I was hinting at before. The other is without any restrictions, without any boundaries, without anything that limits it, without any shortcomings, without just, something which is unlimited in every possible way. It's not exactly clearly defined, but it's a feeling that people have, and those are the kinds of words that they use to describe it. I think it's very problematic. Let's see, unlimited. Now, one way you could think of applying that is, well, is there anything he's not? If there were any quality he didn't have, then he'd be limited. He doesn't have that quality. So that would limit him. So then he has to have all qualities, like evil. Has to be evil. Because otherwise he's lacking the quality of evil. And he's lacking something. And he can't lack anything. It's got to be evil also. So people are usually a little jolted by that. But if they're hypnotized by the idea of unlimited, they say, I'll swallow that too. Who knows how, and God's different, and so forth and so on. Okay. But then, how about if he's unlimited and has to have every quality, what about, are you ready for this? What about the quality of being limited? That's also a quality. Shall we say he has the quality of being limited so that he won't be limited? I hope that's the get-off point. I hope you want to hop off the train now. If I have to enforce his being unlimited by saying he's limited, the game's up. If I have to speak in open, plain contradictions, the better thing to do is to keep my mouth shut. It's not making any sense. So I don't know anywhere in our literature where this intuitive idea of unlimited is applied to a Kodesh Baruch Hu. When we say he's kol yachol, he's all powerful, can do anything, what we really mean is he could do anything that a perfect being should be able to do. We don't mean that he could do anything and everything. For example, can God learn something new? That's a quality that we all have. We all have that power. Does he have that power? Do we have a power that God doesn't have? Yeah, we do. We have the power to learn something new. And he doesn't, because he already knows everything. So he doesn't have the power to learn something new. There's nothing new to him. How about the power to improve, which is similar? The power to improve. That's a real power. Everyone in this room has the power to improve. Does God have the power to improve? No, because he's already perfect. And perfect means as good as it could be. It can't be better than perfect. So does he have every power? No, he doesn't. He has every power that a perfect being should have. He doesn't lack any of the powers that perfection requires. But there are certain powers which are built on imperfection. They're built on failure. They're built on lack. He doesn't have those powers. So this idea of being absolutely unlimited, absolutely unbound, and so forth and so on, I don't know anywhere in our literature where that description is given to Kodesh Baruch Hu. So Ein Sofi were to mean that he's not bounded by anything, that nothing's off limits, I think that we wouldn't accept that. If somebody wants to say, yeah, it's true, but we can't understand it, well, that has cousins in something we spoke about a couple of days ago. There are people who talk like that, and maybe it's right. Maybe it's right to talk that way. But then don't pretend you're saying something which should be understood. What you're doing is you're reciting a kind of mantra. These are the words that I'm told to say, and I don't know what they're talking about. And you don't use them as "here's how it is, guys." You use it as "here's what you're supposed to say, guys." Just repeat them and don't think about it, and just you said them and go home. And that's not the tone of voice that I hear them in. The tone of voice that I hear them in is "here's the truth," and I don't think we can make sense out of it. Okay. Now let's see. What else can I tell you about this? Which let's go back to the one which this is Kuf, where I said you had 6.5 verses of loving kindness and 1/2. I'm sorry. Well, okay. Let's take Kuf and then Shin, where there's a little qualification. Hashem is close to all call upon him, to all who call upon him sincerely. What exactly does it mean to say that if you're not calling sincerely, he might listen, he might not listen, he might respond, he might not respond. Not responding to someone who asks insincerely, what kind of relationship is that? What kind of action is that? I'll give you an example. This is something that happened to me. I know about it, but I was living in Boston about 106 years ago. It was Elul, coming up to Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, and someone, I didn't know him personally, but he was there in Boston, and he came up to me, total stranger, and he said, the Boston Rebbe is not going to have atonement on his Yom Kippur this year. I said, really? Why do you say that? He said, because I did something wrong to him, and I went to him and I asked him for forgiveness, and he refused to forgive me. And someone who refuses to forgive, doesn't get atonement on Yom Kippur. So I said to him, you've got to be wrong. Come on. I know the Rebbe. I've been together with him for years. He would never not forgive. He wouldn't do that. He said, well, check it out. He didn't forgive me, and that's the bottom line. So I went to the Rebbe and I said, listen, this guy's telling people that you didn't forgive him, The Rebbe said, I didn't. I said, really? You didn't? Why not? He said, because he didn't mean it. He didn't mean it when he asked me for forgiveness. A little bit later, I thought to myself, no, wait a second. This guy is maligning the Rebbe in public, right? He's speaking badly of the Rebbe in public. Do you think he really regrets what he did wrong? Isn't that a bit of a contradiction? If he really regrets what he did wrong, he wouldn't be going around saying that the Boston Rebbe is terrible in public, would he? So obviously he wasn't sincere. Now, would it have been a kindness to him for the Rebbe to say, I forgive you? Or was it a kindness to him to say, I don't forgive you? To say, I forgive you would confirm his strategy, his priorities, his ways of dealing with things. I did something. I'm going to lie. I'm going to say I'm asking for forgiveness. It's all a joke. Doesn't matter. Would that have been a gift to him? Would that have improved his life in any way? Say, yes, I forgive you, and let him go on like that? This way, the Rebbe is provoking him that you're not on the right track. You're not dealing with things in an appropriate way. He'll get responses like he got from me, and he'll see it's going to cost him, and maybe he'll think more carefully. So the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't respond to people who are asking insincerely can be the best gift that he can give them. This is what's in psychology is called tough love. And sometimes when somebody asks you for something, the best thing you can do is say, no, I can't give it to you because it's not good for you. I care about you. Okay, now the same thing's true in Shin. Hashem protects all who love him, and all the wicked he will destroy. So, first of all, you have to think not only in terms of the individual, but you have to think about the world. The wicked are harming people and destroying aspects of the world, and to tolerate them, as one noted Jewish thinker said, pity for the criminal is cruelty to the victim. He couldn't help it. He grew up in the wrong neighborhood. It's not his fault, and so forth and so on. But if it's done in an insensitive way, it's cruel to the victim. What you say to the victim is, don't make a big deal out of it. Your suffering doesn't matter. He didn't really mean it. And that's just cruelty. Cynthia Ozick said that. So number one, it's not. But then there's another thought. He's wicked and he's doing destructive actions. If Hashem lets him live, he becomes worse. He becomes more corrupt. That's not good for him either. So there's a certain point at which destroying the wicked is a gift to them also, not just to protecting society from them. So here we come back to a subject which we talked about, the idea that evil in the world has to serve good. So this isn't immediate loving kindness, not giving the person something that he'll enjoy, something that makes him happy. But if it serves the good, could be the general good or even his own good, then it's for the good. It's not good in and of itself, but it's for the good. So it isn't straightforward loving kindness, but on the other hand, it's something which is motivated by loving kindness. As the Maharal says, I think this is in the Mishnah, which says, a kol muchan l'seuda in Pirkei Avos, everything prepared for the celebratory feast. When Mashiach comes, or when the metaphorical feast in the world to come, everything's prepared, and he says that God is goodness. Everything that happens in the world happens to be motivated by goodness, but it doesn't mean that the things that happen are good. Because sometimes the goal of goodness is achieved by putting things in the world that aren't good, but serve the purpose of getting to the good. We spoke about this last time, the idea of the evil inclination, the idea of death. Both of them are destructive, but it's destruction for the sake of the ultimate building. So it's motivated by good, but it isn't a direct expression of the good in the moment. So these things are here. They don't fully contradict, but it's like a little bit of like a reality factoring in an overall picture of the chesed with which HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world. And there's one more thing I'll just mention here. Reish. He will do the well of those who fear him. He will hear their cry and save them. So some want to put the two parts of the verse together. He will do the will of those who fear him, and when he does, and when those who fear him get what they've been asking for, and then they realize it's really bad for them, and it's really destructive, and they're overwhelmed, and they say to Hakadosh Baruch Hu, no, take it back. Yeah, he hears them then also and does that. Because we are in a very tricky position when we ask for what we need. Well, not quite. We ask for what we think we need. We might be wrong. So then the question is, if we asked for it and we're wrong and we got it, will God still have sympathy for us when we say we wish I hadn't asked for it? There's an incident like this in the Gemara. One of the Tanoim, I think, was extremely poor, and there was no food, and the children were hungry, and the wife was in despair, and a golden table leg appeared and fell into their premises, and now they could sell the gold, and they could have what to live on. But I think it was the wife who said, a table leg? I mean, why? Why is that, the way in which the gold comes? And he said, well, the explanation was, well, in the world to come, you'll have a table, four-legged table, but your table will have three legs. Because you got one of the legs here. So, use it up. Take it back! Take it back! So they took it back. She decided she didn't want it. So yeah, it's very tricky when you ask for something, you don't want to use up your reward in the world to come. It's a bad deal. It's a bad deal. So and sometimes the righteous make mistakes. They make mistakes in what they ask for. And then when it happens, they cry out and say, I didn't anticipate this would be the consequence. I didn't see that this was coming. And then it would be terrible. Moses wanted to go into the land of Israel. The Torah tells us, with the Ohr Somayach tells us, he prayed 515 times. The gematria of V'aschanan, which means entreated Kadosh Baruch Hu, 515 times to go into the land of Israel. And God said to him, enough, don't speak to me again about this matter. Some explain because if he had asked another time, then he would have given it to him. But it wouldn't have been good for him, and it wouldn't have been good for the world. That's why God was saying no. Now, the Creator has certain rules with which he runs the world. He's decided upon them, and one is that prayer should have a certain power. So I guess, according to this understanding, 516 would be over the limit, and that would have done the job. Because Baruch was saying to him, if you step over it, you'll regret it. And Moshe Rabbeinu, so to speak, trusted because Baruch and said, okay, I won't ask for it.
This is a side question. How does gematria work for a number, or just the number system work for numbers over 500?
Well, first of all, if you're doing for a word, you add them together, so you can easily get to Sometimes they use final letters, going up the hundreds from 500 to 900 because there are five of them. But beyond that, there isn't a single word that has a value of more than 900. But you get the higher thing by just adding the letters, adding the numbers of the letters in the word. And this, by the way, is a fact that we have to deal with also. I mean, not only tzaddikim have this, we also ask for things. We ask for things on the grounds that we believe that they will be useful for our serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Sometimes students ask, wouldn't it be more cautious and more careful not to ask in detail for anything? Simply say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you know what I need, you know what I will use correctly, please give me what I need. Indeed, Rav Desta says, if you want to make a request that you know for sure will always be answered positively, ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu, give me what I really need. That's what he's going to do anyway, right? All things considered and long-term considered. So there was a time when this wasn't risky. Let's say a person is suffering an illness, that is to say, someone corrected me about this recently. If you want to say, right, he has symptoms of illness. Your whole bodily condition is only symptoms. The real illness is spiritual. So in the 1,000 years when the Jewish people had prophecy, if someone had physical symptoms, he went to a prophet and he said, what does God want me to correct? And the prophet would tell him, and he would correct it, and the physical symptoms would go away. About that, it says, what is the doctor doing in the house of the Jew? What is he doing there? It's just a denial of the means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave you and wanted to use to address your physical needs, physical symptoms, is to look at it spiritually. Since the end of prophecy, we don't have that access anymore. One of the chapters in my book, which is going to come out in Yis Hashem, deal at length with the inability to know what it is that you need in spiritual terms. And And then you have to use the medical profession. And the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch says it in very strong terms. If you don't, you're a terrible criminal. Which means you have to use your own judgment, even though you know your judgment is fallible. That's the condition that God put us in. You have to use your own judgment, even though you know that your own judgment is fallible. That means your eyes are open to see new information and to correct the mistakes that you've made. And that means you have to be willing to change. All that builds into your character, your personality, and your spirituality very good midos. Just like learning b'chavrusa, when you're learning with a chavrusa and you're going to explain the Mishnah, and you think, how could he attack me? Where is what am I saying weak? What am I not defining correctly? Because he's gonna get me. If I don't do it right, he's gonna get me. That's good. You're thinking in defensive terms like that, you're thinking in self-critical terms. Today, that's almost lost. People are just on broadcast. But thinking, I might be wrong, I need to improve, I have to think about it again. Very little of that is going on. That's why there's no free speech in the universities. I should say no. There are a lot of universities out there. The 100 or so universities at which they have demonstrations are a tiny fraction of the 4,999 post-high school educational institutions in the United States. 5,000. And how many did you hear there were demonstrations? 100? 200? 400 out of 5,000. Isn't that a tiny minority? How many students does Columbia University have? 36,000. How many rioted? Well, at one point there were 300, but half of them weren't students. They found out later. They were infiltrators. They came in from the outside. There were a few hundred out of 36,000. I think this talk about the corruption of the entire educational system and so on and so on is greatly exaggerated. When you look at the numbers, they're talking about a fringe. Anyway, as you can tell, it's a pet peeve of mine. Okay, Yes Hashem, tomorrow, today's Wednesday. Tomorrow we'll start a new subject, which I will advertise on the WhatsApp.